What's up, guys? This is Carter Thomas with Coin Mastery TV. Make sure you hit the subscribe button right below this video and make sure the notification bell is also hit so that you get notified whenever we put out daily videos talking about what I consider to be the greatest financial revolution of our entire lifetimes. Now, today we're talking about Bitcoin, what's going on with Bitcoin. We're talking a little bit about Litecoin, talking about the greater crypto market. I want to talk about the U.S. Senate hearing that happened this morning. I watched the whole thing with the chairman of the FTC, CFTC, and the SEC, which we'll get into about what the takeaway was from all that. Talk a little bit about some new developments in Coinbase, or in Bitcoin world, in the crypto world. A little bit of the stock market, and end with a tweet that I put out that really touches on two things: one about crypto itself, and two about the greater concept of attitude in bear markets like this, or in down cycles, and specifically in very steep down cycles, and something that I think is just a very important and relevant topic to be talking about. Now let's look at Bitcoin. Again, you can see this yellow line for anybody who's been watching this show. This is a resistance level that I've been waiting for about 6 months now. And I don't know if it's going to fill. I have no idea if it's going to hit 4,900, but it is where I think that you're going to start to see some serious support. And that's where my heavy buy action is going to go. And I had one or two things that filled low 6,000, but it wasn't enough for me to, right? I'm not betting the farm on it. In fact, it was almost like a test bid just to see if I could, sometimes just having a little skin in the game just keeps you paying attention. I never try to hit everything all on one trade. But no matter what, this 4,900 is when I would start to really layer it in. And if it doesn't get down there and I don't get to deploy a lot of fiat, so be it. That was my plan. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. In fact, that's good. I mean, I will personally, I always like making sure I have enough fiat to not, you just never want to be stressed. That's how you make bad decisions. And so what we're watching now is this market starting to come down. And look at this volume. So when you can see, I'm looking at the daily. The volume is actually starting to show some really good signs. This is a very good signal that we're seeing some support at a higher level than I actually thought. And it may indicate that we're going to see some sort of delayed decline, or even a sideways or an upward trend in the short term. So that could play out in any which way, right? We could see an upward move and then a kind of a flattening out. It could be a couple hours of this, and then we go down. It could, theoretically, I guess it could go straight up. I think that's a very, very low chances of that happening. Or it could, but really it's going to be, the volume is showing something that I did not expect. You would not see this kind of volume if there's not something going on right now. Now, one thing I do think you can take away from this, because I know you're probably hearing that being like, dude, obviously those are the options, but often hearing the options help you play out a scenario of what you're going to do. That's really the end game of all this. But one thing I can tell you, from studying a lot of bear market, going through a handful. I went through my first huge bear market was obviously the recession in 2008, 2009, 2010 to a certain extent. But I didn't have enough in the game to be paying attention to really know what I was doing. And then I've been through a few of these with crypto. I've been in crypto for 4 or 5 years now. But again, I was such a long-term holder. I just didn't care. It was just all right, well, that's how it goes. But one thing I noticed, and you can do your research on any of these on Bitcoin, or go back and look at any market, is that when you're in a bear trend like we are right now, typically we don't get the huge shoot down and then immediate V recovery. So if you look back at the bull run we had, so let's take a look, right? November, you can see this was a big drawdown, but then it recovers very quickly. It forms a V shape, right? It apexes down to a parabolic sell-off, and then it immediately shoots back up. Very strong support almost everywhere. The more parabolic it is, the more you see that that type of activity. But really, over the course of 2017, that was the story, where the recoveries were everybody waiting for a singular trade moment that would then start to, it would continue the onward run. Now, in bear cycles, it behaves differently. And it's really important to know this so that you don't get caught up, deploying all your capital and then stepping back and be like, all right, well, I got the bottom and now it's going to just go up forever. It could. I mean, one thing I've learned in crypto is never underestimate. Nothing is out of the question. But what usually happens is that we see some support come in, and then it starts to lose steam again. We see support, it loses steam, and then it takes more time for these recoveries to really work themselves out. There's a lot of downward momentum, and it takes a lot of time to get that momentum back. Again, crypto has proven people wrong time and time again. So it could happen faster than ordinary markets, but when you start to look at long-term trend lines, that's really the name of the game. So I don't have it right now, but if you started to draw a line between a lot of these low points from starting, let's say in 2017, you would see that there is a trend, and that this line would tend to follow that trend, which is going to be like a linear growth curve, and then it would go up and down kind of according to that trend line. So like I've talked about, what I'm doing is I'm waiting for a confirmation. I'm going to wait for today's candle to close. I'm going to see how that looks. If it doesn't completely engulf yesterday's red candle, sell candle, I should say, I'm going to wait for another one. I'm going to keep waiting. I do not care if I missed 10% of the recovery. What I do care about is buying in, not having a plan, and watching it go down again. That's not what I want. So I'm really waiting for confirmation to see where this thing is going, whether it be sideways or what. And that can translate over into altcoins. One of the altcoins I watch most often is Litecoin. This is a retracement that I drew from May, which is really when this trend kicked off. You could make a case either way, but that's the trend I'm drawing it from, and you can see that it's bouncing off this bottom, the 7,800 level on the daily. This is going to mirror Bitcoin pretty accurately. I'm not on the log scale, so it looks a little bit more dramatic, but I personally think this looks more interesting than Bitcoin's chart from an ROI standpoint. Meaning, when this thing starts to even out, I'm going to buy a lot more Litecoin than I'm going to buy Bitcoin, because I think that this chart has cleared itself out enough so that when it does hit the bottom, Litecoin's also got a lot of good fundamental analysis behind it right now, a lot of good progress, a lot of good development, a lot of good integration potential. That looks really good to me. So, you look at the structure of the chart, you look at the market liquidity, you look at the macro forces, and you make your decision from there. But that's really what I'm looking. But again, I really want to see some of these confirmations. I do not care about that first 10% gain. I just want to know that it's not going to keep going down. So, looking over at coin market cap, trusting coin market cap, we're back up. I think we were down to like 280 or 290 yesterday. So, solid 40, 50 billion back in the market. Excuse me. You can see that we're starting to see some pops back up. If you are a trader, which many people think they are, and they actually aren't. So I think first thing you have to do is be honest with yourself about your skills. I would encourage you to switch this over to BTC, which you can do with this little blue button, and see which coins are performing best relative to Bitcoin, which are bouncing back the best relative to Bitcoin, which is essentially the market sentiment, because this is going to give you in my opinion, a better indicator of what's showing signs of strength. And I think the bigger the coin that still has the strength, the better the potential. So things like NEO, that got pretty good sell-off, it's bouncing back pretty well right now. So I think that that's what I would look at. I wouldn't necessarily look at the US dollars. I would look in relation to Bitcoin, because if you're looking for big ROI in the next, let's say, 6 months, Bitcoin may offer a very strong ROI, but the top 20 coins, in my opinion, are going to offer the best ROI for risk that you can get. Protocol coins, I've been saying. That's just my opinion. I have no idea. Could be wrong. Do your own research, blah, 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 the whole disclaimer, right? Now, let's get into what happened this morning. It was awesome. Nerding out completely, listening to regulatory Senate hearings. And I'll link this up. There's an archived video, and I'll see if I can find a summary anywhere, a good summary of the actual Q&A. But here's a bottom line from my opinion. One, it was a stern but open-minded approach. This is all loosely speaking. Obviously, you should make your own conclusions about this. Meaning, they want to severely penalize people that are fraudulent scammers trying to screw over the average, what they call Main Street investor. But they also want to allow for this thing to have some runway to proliferate, to go big, because they look back at the last 30 years of the United States, and technology has driven a lot of innovation and growth for the economy to keep the United States in the top tier of, the G10, right? I mean, it's to allow it to make more money and to, have trade and all that sort of thing. So they know that, right? And there's a few things that they said specifically that impact some of you. The first, I think, is that the SEC chairman, Clayton, he was very, very clear and very adamant that ICOs are securities and that there really isn't any gray area, at least from this testimony, meaning there's going to be an ongoing microscope put on ICOs as it relates to securities. What I think, they wouldn't get into how they're going to do it, like exactly what actions they're going to take, but if I had to guess based on what they're already doing and what they've already said, they're going to go after the biggest first, and they're going to go after the ones that are the most blatant scams, and then they're slowly going to use that to get legislation passed, which will then retroactively impact existing ICOs, securities, whatever else it may be, and to really just regulate it moving forward. I think that when they look at what their courses of action look like, it's going to be very difficult to be retroactive against a lot of ICOs that already happened, but they will be retroactive against ICOs that were blatantly using things like false marketing, like, hey, we're going to guarantee you 200% returns and we're going to promise you all this, and almost fake stuff. Use that as an example to further the agenda. And, I have no idea if that's going to happen, by the way. This is purely speculation. But I think that they really are very clear about what making ICOs and tokens and everything in the crypto space as a security. I think that's going to be a big thing. And we'll see how that plays out, right? How it affects everybody. But they don't have, the SEC itself does not have jurisdiction necessarily over a lot of the areas like exchanges, meaning they can't go and audit GDAX and make sure that there's no market manipulation because that's not within their realm of jurisdiction. Now, adding futures with the CFTC gives them a little bit more jurisdiction because the spot price, right, like the actual price that futures are based off of, comes from Gemini or GDAX or a blend, which gives them some rights to look at things like exchanges. But these guys they're like, there's only so much we can really do, which is what brought about the idea of, hey, do we need to make more legislation? They said they're going to come back with some ideas at a further date. So ICOs being securities, I think the biggest thing is just not doing anything that how would I say this? If an ICO is like, hey, we can't take people from whatever country, or we're trying to prevent this, the more that gets broken, the more the regulation is going to come down. And typically, the best proxy for what's going to be affected most is you look at the things in any market that offers the biggest return in the shortest amount of time. That's typically what's going to get regulated first. In this case, ICOs. So we'll see what happens with that. I think the other piece, which many people, it kind of got glossed over, but I thought was really interesting, was the CFTC chairman, I guess Christopher Giancarlo. He opened his statement by talking about how he has three kids in college and a niece who have never been interested in the financial world at all. They've never been interested in stocks, bonds, equities, whatever. But with Bitcoin and with crypto, it's the first time that they actually are really interested in this stuff. And that has created discussions between his children in college and the niece, who I think is in her 30s. And they've gotten really excited about this. And it's not only about the price, but it's also about the technology and what this all represents and the social side of it. And I think that was super interesting because change happens at that level. He is going home for Thanksgiving and for Christmas and maybe for spring break, and goes on weekend trips and gets on the phone with his kids that are in college, and he's talking to them just as much as he's talking to his coworkers. I think it's easy to think that regulators are living in a fishbowl and they don't know anything about crypto. They don't talk to anybody. They don't hear about anything. But I think that very brief story provides a very important insight into the idea that the kids who are in college, they have access to a lot of the same content that I'm sure many of you do. I don't know. I don't know if they watch Coin Mastery. Probably should. But they are watching YouTube videos. They're on Twitter. They're listening to podcasts. They're seeing this all happen too. And they have the ear of their dad, who is making a lot of these policy decisions, or at least directing it. That's why I think it's so important to never underestimate talking to people, talking to friends, sharing this what's going on, and getting away from how much money you could make and the price and the ROI and the speed. I mean, that's obviously a huge part of it. It's a big part of this channel. But the more we can make this into a huge innovative technological financial revolution, and do it in a way that's responsible and be able to educate and empower people to go tell that story, a true story, it's really powerful. They didn't give anything specific about what they're going to do next. They did say that they are looking at all of this very, very closely. They want to give this a chance to do well. They just don't want people to get screwed over. And think what you want about regulators, about government, whatever it may be. That's not going to change. That is what it is. That's what they are here to do, is to hopefully protect people from scam artists and from people getting ripped off, and market manipulators, pump and dumps, whales that completely manipulate price. And literally, people screw you guys over. They screw me over. And that's, whether it's a regulator's job, whether it's a market's job, I don't know. But that's what these guys are trying to do. So it was interesting. There wasn't a whole lot of takeaways other than I would be shocked if they came out and said, this is all illegal. We're never letting anybody do this. You can never trade crypto again, things like that. I do think that they're going to come out with strict regulations around ICOs and securities. I do think that exchanges that are US based are going to need some pretty solid compliance, and maybe even allow for some sort of surveillance isn't the right word, but audit in order to allow things like an ETF. I don't know that, that's up to Coinbase and Gemini and Bittrex. It's their call, but that I think is the exchanges. I think is going to be a big deal. And I'm not convinced that centralized exchanges are the solution to that personally. long term, I think there's a huge market for decentralized exchanges, but I think centralized exchanges that have the blessing of the regulators will allow for like the trillions of dollars to come in, because that's when you get custodial. That's when you get the real money to come in. So we'll see what happens. Similarly, for anybody who's been waiting, Coinbase released yesterday. They are going to be releasing Segwit soon. If you don't know what Segwit is, short for segregated witness. This is basically allows for very cheap fees with Bitcoin and faster transactions. It allows you to batch transactions. This has been a long requested request. A lot of people have been asking for this for a long time. So it's good to see them implementing this, and this should help with Bitcoin getting a better reputation, faster, cheaper, easier to use, have that proliferate down, integrate with more wallets, all that sort of stuff, right? Speed is a big deal in crypto, transaction times. And the more we can integrate this at the top level, the better. It's good for the ecosystem. It's good for the price. So always some good news, no matter what the market may look like. Speaking of which, we're looking at the stock market had the biggest single day loss in history by points. Now that's percentage wise. I think it's like 105th worst day ever. So in the grand scheme of things, relatively speaking, it wasn't that bad. Kind of like how this pullback is one of the worst, but it's actually not the worst. Right? But point wise, it's absolutely, it's definitely the worst. So always keeping it relative. What was really interesting is that one of the big things that happened with this sell-off was the VIX, the VIX. That is the volatility index, which allows you to bet on how volatile you think the trading in the market will be that day. The VIX skyrocketed. I think up 120% yesterday. That's how big the volatility ramped. Similarly, there is a trading instrument that allows you to short the VIX, which is just, it's leverage too, which is one of the dumbest things I think you could possibly do, or riskiest things you could possibly do. And that triggered a lot of automatic trading, potentially high frequency, that after hours caused it to really, really, really dip. I think it was like a 90% dip. Luckily, the market recovered today, but it is going to do two things. One, I think it's going to start to examine the amount of robo trading that's going on, both on ETFs and in high frequency trading, which is that's a huge. That's just a whole another basket of worms, which we're not getting into. But I think the other thing is that we finally have, or there finally is there's something else that takes the media's attention other than crypto. So right now, like the Bitcoin goes down, it's like, oh, this is the worst thing ever happened. Fear, everything is dead. And now the Dow Jones has the biggest ever loss. And it's so interesting because the media comes out and they're like, oh, well, here's why this isn't that bad. And here's why this is a healthy thing for the market. But with Bitcoin, it's like, this is the biggest Ponzi scheme ever. So it's actually, from a media standpoint, it's kind of good because that fear gets absorbed into a new place. So when people can put their fear somewhere else, in this case into the stock market, into the Dow Jones, NASDAQ, whatever, they inherently will not put it into crypto. And the perception of crypto, the good news coming out of crypto, will start to rise up even faster because it will not be pushed down. If you ever notice in life, just as much as in the charts, which is a representation of decisions, there is support and resistance just as much as there is in trading. So right now, like, good news is support, bad news is resistance. And it's the same thing. So when we lose that fear, when something else can absorb it, the support can really come through. Now, I'm not saying that's a sustainable thing or whatever. I'm just saying that I think that over the long term, over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, there is going to be a constant supply of good support from a news standpoint, and the less bad news coming out where Bitcoin's the headline, the more we will see sustainable growth, and it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think that's the big takeaway for me. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows if the money flowed from the stock market to crypto. Like you can't measure that unless you talk to someone who actually did it. But I think from a media standpoint, that's really powerful. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Dow Jones dropped a lot, got all the headlines, and crypto started to come back today. Bitcoin, at least. I mean, all of them for the most part. So, right, wag the dog. If you've ever seen that movie, it's kind of the same idea, right? You create headlines over here so that you can do something over here. It's the same thing. Now, last thing, I tweeted about this last night, which kind of a heady tweet. I'm not gonna lie. This wasn't the kind of thing that gets 1,000 retweets or anything. But it is something that I feel passionate about. I think that it represents something bigger than what I tweeted about, which is the idea. And I'll let you guys go read this. Is the idea of equity capitalism versus network capitalism. The other way of saying that is, how do you assign a value to cryptocurrency? Why is it one Bitcoin worth $7,000, whatever, right? $20,000. Why is one Litecoin worth $128? Especially when they're not making money the way that traditional equities work. And this is something that I really want to explore, not maybe through these videos, but maybe through like going to speak at conferences or groups or just talk to people. This is the idea, because the more people understand this, I think the more momentum crypto will get, right? Because at least from a support standpoint. And I think you can read through this if you want to learn more, just see where I'm coming from, and I'll expand on this at some point. But I think the bigger idea is that the difference between being an optimist and a permabull. I think that people may look at what I'm doing with Coin Mastery. They may look at Twitter, YouTube, and they may think that I am some just like, I think it's just going to always go up, and that crypto is going to be the big, huge revolution, and no matter what, we're going to crush it, and everything's always going to go up. Don't worry about it. It's going to be great. And I think that it's important to separate that from being optimistic about the future of cryptocurrency. There is a reason why I have bids sitting here for 6 months at 4,900. And as it went up, I was taking profits. And, if you sign up for the newsletter, which you should all do, coinmastery.com/invest. I don't talk about hot new 1,000% ROIs. I talk about boring stuff. I talk about dollar cost averaging, buying the dips, being smart, playing the long game, buying the big coins. I mean, it's not flashy or sexy stuff for this exact reason, right? So I think that's really important I think not only just to clarify, but also just for anybody out there, is that I look at the timing of all this, right? It dawned right as the financial collapse happened. It's starting to heat up right as the VIX is going to an all-time high. I look at the larger 100-year window of this and how this is all happening. I look at millennials and their like the way that's all playing out. And so I'm very optimistic about this whole revolution. Price is just a way to measure it. And a great byproduct is that we can all profit from it. We can all be early and make money off of it, make crypto off of it, whatever you want to accumulate. It doesn't mean that you're blind to the potential down cycles. It doesn't mean that you're not smart. You still want to have a plan. You want to be prepared for any situation. When things are going parabolic, that's why every day we would be like, what are you writing down? What's your thing say? How much are you taking off the table? Are you an investor? Can you lose this money? That kind of thing. And I just want to be super clear about that, because I'm optimistic because of these ideas, because of the wealth shifting, because of the writing being on the wall, and being able to be in front of that, and being able to really do something about a world that I want to see change in. That's why I'm so fired up about this stuff. And yes, I do very much love the financial benefits of it all. No question. but I'm optimistic about this, about the revolution, about the shift. And I'm not always optimistic about the price. And you shouldn't be either. You should be realistic about the price, but be optimistic about the market, about what this is driving, about the assets, about the tech, about the community, the people, the energy that we have. That's really exciting. And so every day, you can choose what kind of information you can consume and what kind of information you can produce, what thoughts you can have, what you're reading, what you're listening to, what you're writing, what you're saying, who you're talking to, who you're listening to. You can influence a lot by having an optimistic viewpoint. And if you let price get in the way of your optimism, you're going to get hosed over the long term because you're going to let the price dictate your mood and your vision. And that's when it's very hard to survive that game. You got to believe in what we're doing, in what this is all about. And I truly believe it. And there's this tweet is really built on the economics behind it, right? Why I think it's going to change or how I think it's going to change. The price is the finance behind it, and the community is the people behind it. That's the energy. That's the support. That's why I do these videos, is because this is what I can do, hopefully, to create something that does impact this, to create a world that I want. I refuse to sit back and let other people just, tell me what my life is going to be. That's not going to happen. So you should go check this tweet out. I'll link to it, but don't let price dictate your optimism. Get your fundamentals straight, get your vision straight, get your principles straight. Price will work itself out when you are investing in good, solid assets. You have a plan. You can profit handsomely off of it if you play your cards right. And so anyway, just wanted to talk about that. I think it's really important as we go into this next big, huge phase, because next couple of years, this thing is going to get huge. And if you let these prices get to you and just tear you down and, lose your money or whatever, more importantly, kill your spirit, just don't let that happen. Cool. All right, guys. As always, awesome to talk. I will catch you later. All right. Peace out.